month, we're going to have a webinar like the one we're having today on a topic that we are confident we have something to share. And of course, we're starting with creative intelligence because it's something that is very central in everything we do. And we believe it's definitely a mindset or skill that we would like everyone in the community to really have in their tools, because we believe that it makes all the difference. And we are going to prove this, right, Freddie, throughout this presentation, so that you ideally at the end of the presentation, you know what creative intelligence is and how you can use it in your everyday work, but also every time you're facing a challenge or a problem, you're gonna tap into your creative intelligence and find new solutions that maybe you couldn't see before. So whenever you're ready, Freddie, the stage is yours. We are ready to learn.
Great. So the presentation, creativity is your competitive advantage. This is the topic of today's webinar. Thank you, Joya, for introducing me. I am Freddie Gibbons, as it says here. I'm a senior innovation consultant here at Sense Worldwide. I have a background in design, and I think that's where a lot of my passion for creativity really comes from. So I'm really excited to share with you some of our thinking around creativity and creative intelligence today. So first of all, who are we, for those who might not be as familiar with us as a brand? We are Sense Worldwide. We are a innovation house, innovation consultancy, agency, however you want to sort of describe us. We help some of the world's biggest and most innovative companies be more innovative. And we do this through collaborating with people in the Sense network, people like yourselves, a community of fantastic individuals that get involved with projects and can really help us harness creative intelligence, which is what this webinar is all about. So there's a few different points in today's presentation. First of all, I'll share with you a little bit about what creative intelligence actually is, why we believe creative intelligence is so important, our creative intelligence mission as a brand, and finally the 5 principles of creative intelligence, just to help you understand a little bit more about how you might want to develop your own if it's something you're interested in. And finally, we'll open up for some questions from everybody if you have any. And this is very much just a collaborative conversation, so feel free to ask any questions as we go through. Put your hand up if you want to say anything. Just shout out, and we can continue from there. So starting off, what is creative intelligence? First big question. Many of you will probably have heard of IQ, which is our intelligence quota. It is our logical and rational reasoning. Some of you might have heard of EQ, our emotional awareness, our emotional intelligence. Creative intelligence falls somewhere in between those two pieces. It's the connection between the emotional and the rational and logical. It is our creative intelligence. We define it as the ability to understand, interpret, and act with imagination. And we believe that anybody can have creative intelligence. You know, as Nike say, anybody with a body is an athlete. We believe anybody with a brain can be creative. It's a muscle that we can flex and develop, and hopefully part of this presentation will help you feel confidence in developing your own if it's something you're interested in. It's important to know creative intelligence is a mindset, not a methodology. You've probably heard of creative intelligence. You've probably heard of design thinking, which is very much a methodology. It's a set of tools and processes that you can apply to your everyday. Creative intelligence is a little bit different from that. It's a fundamental shift in the way that we approach the world around us. It's a piece of our subconscious that we can pull on in our daily life to tackle problems in new ways. It's very much a mindset, not a methodology. But don't take our word for it. This is Irene, she's an individual who's taken one of our creative intelligence courses way back in the day. And she said, I've been a translator my whole life. It's not a very creative career. This course helped me to open my mind. It pushed me to think differently and approach challenges in new ways. So first little question for the team here today. How would you rate your creative intelligence, just based on that very brief overview of what it is, the ability to understand, act and interpret with imagination? How would you rate yours? Put it in the chat and we can move from there. Got a 4, a 3, 2 3s? Fantastic.
I feel like I can't go any higher than a 5 now. Would be tooting my own trumpet too much. 6.
And Courtney's a 6. That's great. Well, it's good to see there's a good mix, and we all feel like we've got a reasonably high level of creative intelligence. Hopefully we can boost some of those up to a 5 by the end of this presentation, and if not, we can help you figure out how you might do that in the future. But that's great to see. So moving on, why is creative intelligence so important? I believe, and I think as an organization, we strongly believe that if everybody thinks the same, outcomes will always be the same. New ideas, innovation in general is not driven by homogeny. It's not driven by people who think the same ways as everybody else. It's often driven by those who can bring fresh perspectives to a challenge, those who can bring something new. So the question then becomes, how do we think differently? This is the essence of creative intelligence, the answer to how we can think differently. And to give some facts and figures, in 2020, LinkedIn identified creativity as one of the top skills companies needed most. The World Economic Forum, in their Future of Jobs report, said that complex problem solving, critical thinking, and creativity topped the list of skills needed to thrive in the 4th industrial revolution. And it's not all about employability. The Journal of Positive Psychology found that those who take part in creative activities actually can trigger an upward spiral of well-being. So embracing your creativity can actually make you a happier person as well. But this is really important because, as I said earlier, there's this 4th industrial revolution. And if we look at past industrial revolutions, it's been about replacing manual labor with machines, and this next piece is all about that next leap. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, these are pieces that are going to not just replace manual labor, but human thinking labor, the pieces that previously computers couldn't replicate, but they can now. But in the future, the piece that those artificial intelligences and those machine learning algorithms aren't going to be able to replicate is the creativity and the imagination that is really a uniquely human skill. And this is Karen. She was a senior strategist at Chicago, and she's also another creative intelligence alumni. She said creative thinking is like a course in elite thinking. And you can see, it's a way of thinking for the future, a way of thinking differently. But if creative intelligence is this amazing thing, why isn't it so ubiquitous? Why isn't it talked about everywhere? The reality is that creativity is educated out of us. This is Sir Ken Robinson, an international advisor for education. And he said, when it comes to all human beings, and that can correlate to this loss of creativity as we age, is education. By teaching us what is right, what is wrong, we begin to be afraid of our own imagination. It's really that education is just teaching us how to think in straight lines. It's not teaching us how to think differently. We're taught how to get the best grades, not how to be creative. And this is where our creative intelligence mission comes in. As we have discovered in the last few years, the world changes incredibly fast. Economics can change overnight. Pandemics can change the way that we work and the way that we interact with our colleagues. New technologies like Bitcoin can rise and fall in a matter of weeks. And of course, war can have a huge impact on the world as we know it. And these things can change the world incredibly fast. But we believe that whatever problems that people, planet, and business face, that creativity and the application of creative intelligence can help us solve those problems. But as we said, in a world where creativity is under attack, and it's something that's educated out of us, it is a cause worth fighting for, which is why we created creative intelligence and the course behind it, and why we dedicate ourselves to sharing this knowledge through activities like this today. So, taking you through a few different pieces already. What is our creative intelligence? Why is creative intelligence important? Our creative intelligence mission. And the next piece is the 5 principles of creative intelligence. But I wanted to take a minute, just pause for anybody on the call, see if there's any questions. If not, we can move on. But if there are, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm just taking advantage of this short pause to remind people that in the Sense Network, in our platform, you can find the creative intelligence course that Freddie was referring to. If you scroll to on the left side, there is a menu with all the different sections, and one of the sections is courses. So if you click over there, you will find the course is self-paced. We estimate it might take you around 8 hours, not on the same day. You can do it in different days, but there's more or less the duration. And so if this is a theme that is of interest of you, if you see the value, and you're definitely going to see how many different ways you can apply the different principle, that is definitely the ideal next step for you. You'll be able to delve even deeper into creative intelligence. So thank you, Freddie.
No problem. And if I didn't make it clear, that creative intelligence course is completely free as well for anybody in the Sense Network. So
yeah,
head on over. Great. Well, it looks like there's no questions moving forward. So let's dive into the 5 principles of creative intelligence, shall we? So as I said, there are 5 principles. The first is expanding your mind so you can see things from new perspectives. The second is challenge your default, which is all about changing the way that we approach our challenges. The third is building your creative confidence. This is all about becoming comfortable with ambiguity and failure. Seeking out diverse perspectives is all about gathering feedback from people unlike yourself. And the last is adopting experimental mindsets, which is all about experimenting with purpose. So we'll dive into each of these in a little bit more detail. The first is expand your mind. So as I said, this first principle is all about seeing the world through perspectives that are not your own. When considering this, you might ask yourself, have you ever noticed people ignoring the evidence right in front of them? Have you ever been blinded by your own expertise? Are you aware of you and any teams that you might work in, your biases? Now, the first piece of expanding your mind is all about these unconscious biases. And for anybody who might not know what a bias is, it's basically just a tendency to lean in one direction over another. And an unconscious bias is when that's built from our previous experiences, when it's built from the media that we've absorbed over the years. It's often an uncontrollable bias that we aren't immediately aware of, and those biases that happen in snap decisions. To give an example, how might you feel walking down the road and seeing this dog walking towards you? Would you feel comfortable? Would you run up to it and pet it on the head? Would you maybe cross the street to avoid it? And would that change if you saw this dog walking towards you on the street? Would you still cross the street, or would you be more willing to run up to this dog and give it a pat? If you said that if you thought that your approach to these dogs might be different, then you have an unconscious an unconscious bias. Thanks for the comment, Josh. Yeah, you're probably right that maybe the appearance of the dog has something to do with it, but it still sort of applies to the same problem, that we have unconscious biases. And in fact, when it comes to dogs, the media has told us over the years that pit bulls and dogs like that are much more likely to attack us. They're much more likely to be aggressive. But in reality, there isn't any scientific proof that these dogs are more likely to be aggressive. And in fact, it's much more likely that it's going to be impacted by their upbringing, their environment. These are the pieces that will affect a dog's aggression towards people, nothing towards their breed at all. So that's an example of an unconscious bias that a lot of people have, that's just developed through media telling us that a specific breed is more aggressive than others. Now, the reason it's important to understand our biases is that they're fantastic for snap decisions that might be less important, like, do I need to buy a Coke or a Pepsi? You can work off of your previous experiences and use your unconscious bias to know that you might have a preference towards one or another. But when making big, important, strategic decisions, they can prevent us from seeing a bigger picture. Take, for example, the very, very realistic situation in which you might be running away from a lion. Your biased response will be to run in the other direction. But you wouldn't be considering a bigger picture. It will prevent you from seeing the cliff right in front of you, because that's not part of your previous experiences. Your previous experiences are just telling you to run. So it's important when making bigger decisions, when trying to be a little bit more strategic, that we take a step back. We are aware of our biases so that we can take in that bigger picture and make decisions that work better for ourselves. The second principle is challenge your default. So this one's all about doing things a little bit differently. Ask yourself, do you go straight to the solution when faced with a challenge? Do you have a certain way of doing things that's hard to change? Do you ever forget to consider that you might be wrong? A little bit of an activity just before I dive into this one, and you don't have to leave any comments, but it's just something for you to think about as we move through the next slides, is to think about your biggest challenge right now. Maybe it's a challenge at work about trying to share something with your boss. Maybe it's a challenge at home. You're trying to tell your partner or your housemate that they shouldn't leave socks on the floor anymore. Just what are those challenges that you're facing, that you're struggling to approach, to solve? And we'll come back to that challenge towards the end, but just try have something in your mind as we go through these next slides. Now, the first lesson is to reframe your challenges, is to think about them differently. And this is really about trying to understand the problem you're trying to solve. What are the needs you're trying to meet? Now, this is a completely unsubstantiated quote. Einstein might have never said this, but it's still a fantastic quote, so we wanted to leave it in. He said, or supposedly said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. What he's really saying, or what we interpret that he might have been saying, is that if we don't understand the problem in front of us, we could spend an hour solving it, but we would have solved the wrong thing and we would have wasted our time. Let's take, for example, the humble wallet. How would you improve it? What are the ways that we might improve upon the wallet? You might say, okay, I want to reduce the size of the wallet. You'll take away all of the coin pouches, you'd put in cards and you'd wrap it with an elastic band, and that's a reduced size wallet. You might make it the most beautiful thing in the world, get unparalleled Italian leather and make it an absolutely gorgeous statement piece. But really, these changes are just iterative improvements upon the wallet. They're not really being innovative at all. We can take a tool like laddering and instead reframe that challenge. If we ask ourselves why before jumping to the how, we could ask ourselves, why do we want to make a better wallet? We might say that it's to make the payment experience more convenient or more enjoyable. And this opens us up then to new solutions that we wouldn't have been able to see with that previous way of thinking. So you might come up with a smartphone wallet like Apple Pay or Google Pay, something I'm sure that a lot of us have in our pockets or on our wrists today. To give another example, and this is an example I really love. Let's take, for example, the challenge that a building manager might have, where they need to replace their elevator. They ask themselves why. Why do I need to replace my elevator? They might come to the conclusion that their residents are actually complaining. So it's not that the elevator is broken, it's just that there's been complaints about the elevator they do have. So why have they been complaining would be the next level down. Well, the wait is too long. That's the answer to that. So you could stop there. You could say, okay, great. I just need to speed up my elevator. That's my challenge. How do I speed up my elevator? But you could continue going down that process of asking why. Why is the wait too long? What's the actual problem here? Well, the wait is boring. It's not too long. It's just people don't enjoy the 30 seconds they have to stand in front of the elevator for. So the new challenge might be, instead of I need to replace my elevator or I need to reduce the length of it, is I need to make that wait less boring. And this is actually a true story, and it's why we often see mirrors next to elevators, because it helps make that wait a little bit more bearable. We have a chance to check ourselves out, make sure our makeup's right, make sure our hair's on point, and it just makes that wait a little bit shorter. And this is, a real life example of how somebody asked themselves why several times and was managed to save themselves thousands of pounds not having to replace an elevator, just install a mirror. So going back to those challenges, if anybody feels comfortable in doing so, feel free to leave a comment about it in the chat, but if not, we can move on. But I do encourage you just to think, with reframing those challenges, can you approach them from a new perspective? Can you change that challenge and come at it from a new angle?
I just wanted to add that going through this explanation, it's actually not my first time, honestly, but I was really letting it sink in. So the good news is that this webinar will be available as a recording, so you can go through it over and over. And we are also going to share by the end of the webinar a PDF with the 5 principles, so it will be easier for you to, have it with you, either printed it or having it on your desktop and refer back to it. But it's so important being able to really define the problem. And what you just show in this example with the elevator is the shift from what was considered to be the problem. But the moment you start asking yourself the right question, you might understand that what you thought was the problem is not the real problem. And so there are different levels you could tackle this and make it and find a solution that will have people, happier, like in the case for the elevator, without actually changing anything structural about the elevator, but just changing the perception of what the problem was. So I think there's so many ways you can apply that, even in relationship with people. Like there are so many different layers in those relationships as well. So what we might consider the problem could not be actually the problem. And if we are not able to step back, we will never get to the stage of actually seeing things from different perspectives. And sometimes even problems that look unsolvable might not be so if we are able to reframe them in that way.
Precisely. Let's move on to principle 3 then. Build your creative confidence. So this third principle is all about embracing the uncertainty of ambiguity. It's about trusting your instincts. And if you build your creative confidence, you're able to trust those instincts and you're more likely to embrace uncertainty. So ask yourself as we're going through this, do you ever stand still out of the fear you're moving in the wrong direction? Do you rely heavily on the opinions of others to make big decisions? What do you do when not all of the information is known? So, as we mentioned earlier, creativity is often educated out of us, and this is because we are taught to fear failure. We're taught that failure is the end all of education, of work, of life. A question for the channel today: how do you feel about failure? I'll give you a minute to just maybe have a think about it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on failure in the chat. If you work in a team, what does your team do when you might fail at something? Or if you have a family, how do you react if somebody fails within the family? Or if you're even more comfortable, feel free to just speak out. No need to put it in the comments if you're comfortable with talking.
I can chip in. So from my perspective, there's no failure in life. It's all just one. It's just a step-by-step process towards success, or towards the right outcome, as it were. So yeah, I mean, I've always said that to my teams. You've got to try it. I say, if you're not failing once a day, you're not trying hard enough. You know, that's that kind of thing. You got to be putting it out there. You got to be giving it a go.
That's a fantastic way of thinking about failure, and brings me nicely onto the next page, which is that we do need to reframe failure. It needs to be embraced. It's a strategic advantage. Being open to failure allows us to be more creative. We're not the only ones who believe this. This is Eric Fromm, a social psychologist. He's actually famous for developing the theory that freedom is something that is innate to human nature. So he's a man who knows what he's talking about. And he used to say, creativity requires the courage to let go of certainties. And this is something that this principle really embraces. I've just seen Mirella has left a comment in the chat. Failure is an opportunity to start over and see things from different perspectives, but it's not always easy to face it. We are used to see it as a bad thing. Totally agree. I think that's how a lot of people see failure, but we really do believe that it is something that needs to be embraced. And we'll come back to this idea of failure a little bit later in Principle 5, because it does come up again. So we'll continue talking about it. But before we do, there is Principle 4, seek out diverse perspectives. So this is something as an organization we believe in really strongly, and it's why we have the Sense Network. It's why it was originally developed and cultivated, and why we love having people like yourselves within the Sense Networks, because we believe in the power of cognitive diversity and the value that feedback from diverse groups of people can bring to ideas, to people, to projects. So for this piece, ask yourself, do you have conversations that challenge your own point of view? Do you seek out feedback to improve on yourself and your ideas? Do you seek out controversial perspectives, talking with rejectors or even your biggest critics? You'll have heard this quote before. It won't be anything new, but it's something we believe in. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. It is through feedback that we can grow as people, we can grow our ideas and our projects. But as I said earlier, if everybody thinks the same, the outcome will always be the same. If we approach 10 people who have the same backgrounds, the same perspectives, the same experiences in life, and ask them for feedback on ourselves, on an idea or on a project, all we will get back is 10 answers that say the same thing slightly differently. Whereas if we consider cognitive diversity and we bring in different perspectives, different points of view, all of a sudden that response that we get, that feedback we get, will be multiplied. And we'll be able to build on our ideas from a number of perspectives, not just one. To give a really great example of cognitive diversity, I think if I asked most people, what does a can opener look like? This is the answer I'd get. It's very traditional looking can opener. Maybe the smiley face is slightly out there, but for the most part, this is what can openers look like to people. However, if I went out and asked a diverse group of people, you might realize that there is an endless number of of can openers out there. You know, I could ask a chef and they might share with me an industrial can opener that helps them in the kitchen open those really big cans. I might ask someone who isn't as wealthy or slightly poorer than the rest of us, and they might share with me the one in the top right, a can opener developed to be, you know, an affordable piece of equipment. I might ask a camper if they ever have can openers, and they'd share with me the Swiss Army knife. And I think you might ask someone with arthritis, and they'd share the one on the far right, a machine that can open cans for you. This just shares some of what cognitive diversity can do for us. It really helps us open our minds and expand our view to see a single subject, an idea, and ourselves through the perspectives of others. And we think that's really important when it comes to creative intelligence, is embracing and harnessing cognitive diversity. Moving on to the final principle, adopt an experimental mindset. So this is all about exploration and experimentation. So ask yourselves, do you share early to avoid wasting time, money, and resources? Or do you wait until something's perfect and finished before you might share it with your teams or your family? You know, the big question is, do you experiment with purpose? Now, experimentation in its most simplest form has three pieces. It's testing, learning from that testing, and iterating from what you've learned, and doing that over and over and over again. A really great example of the person who did this, you've probably heard of him, James Dyson, with his Dyson vacuums. Before he released his first ever vacuum, he made 5,127 iterations before completing it. But he used to say that that wasn't 5,127 failures, that was 5,127 steps towards his final product, which the core of which is still in his Dysons today. The most important message here, though, is to experiment with purpose, to know what it is you should experiment on. To give a little bit of a silly example, let's say I was designing a flying car. What would I test first? What would you in the channel test first? Would you test the wheels or the wings? Feel free to put that in the chat or speak out if you'd like to. Which piece would you do first? Okay, Paul does the wings. Anything else from anybody in the channel? Not, I'll put us out of our misery. Wings. Great. We've got two wings there. You are correct. And the reason for this is because the wings are the most pivotal part of that experiment. It's the piece that is the hardest to get right. So you need to test it first in order to make sure it's even possible before you start doing the easy pieces like the wheels. And if we learn that it's not possible to do, if we can't create a car with wings that flies, which I suspect is not possible, then we've avoided wasting our time. We've avoided wasting money and resources on developing the rest of a car that just won't work. We're not the only people who do this. We're not the first people to discover the idea of testing the hardest thing first. This is Astro Teller. He's the head of X, formerly Google X, their moonshot factory. And I believe in a TED talk, he said, "I have a secret for you. The moonshot factory is a messy place. We spend most of our time breaking things and trying to prove that we're wrong. That's it. That's the secret. Run at all the hardest parts of the problem first. Get excited to say, how are we going to kill our project today?" And those are our 5 principles of creative intelligence. Now, they are very high level principles. As Joya kindly said, if you want to learn a little bit more about them, we do have the creative intelligence course. I'll open up for questions in a minute, but just to share with you a little bit more, about how you might want to develop your creative intelligence if you would like to. We have a podcast, Extreme Perspectives, where we just talk with interesting, fascinating, brilliant people to help people hear perspectives and to hear from people unlike themselves. And we have mind expansion meetups just like this one today. We run them every week. We run different ones every week. If you're interested in that, check out the Sense Network homepage. I think there's a little bit more information on that, or I'm sure Joya can share a little bit with us as well.
Yes, exactly. So if you add after this webinar to the event section in the Sense Network, you will see everything that is coming in the next weeks. We have something like this is the mind expansion extended format because it's a little bit longer, and of course to go more into details with topic and ideas that we strongly believe in. And of course, as I say, creative intelligence is definitely one of the milestones in our big vision. Meanwhile, in the chat, I also share with you the magic PDF, that one pager that Freddie created, which is like a recap of the 5 principles that we just went through, so that you can download it and keep it with you whenever you're facing new challenges and you want to incorporate new perspective. We will also share it in the platform in a couple of days, but for now it's just for you who have attended the webinar live. So it's definitely going to be useful because, of course, like everything that we learn afresh for the first time, maybe you were already applying some of these principles but in an intuitive way, but we believe that just having a small reminder will help you not lose tracks with the way you can incorporate creative intelligence more in your everyday life and in your career. So we tend to believe that this is a way that you can make it like a daily practice. And if you do, you will definitely reap many benefits, because this is more or less what like underlies everything that we do at the Sense Worldwide and Sense Network, right, Freddie? And all the consultants actually apply the creative intelligence in the project that they work with. So it's definitely something that we feel really represents our way of tackling issues, problem, projects, work. Is that correct? We have some of the team in here. I hope they also believe the same. But we thought it's so relevant and important that why just keep it for ourselves? We want everyone to be aware of the power of creative intelligence and be able to use it from now on.
Precisely. Great. And of course, if you want to get in touch with me or to understand a little bit more about creative intelligence or just to talk about it, feel free to email me. This is my email address, freddie.gibbons@senseworldwide.com. Yes, I'll welcome any emails or any conversations. You can also find me in the Sense Network if that's where you prefer to contact me. So that is the end of the presentation. Any questions? If you prefer to put it in the chat, feel free to put it in the chat. You're also welcome to talk and share your questions with us through Zoom. Thanks, Aoife.
I'll break the ice just because something came to my mind while you were going through the principle, but of course, I'm just keeping an eye on the chat. If there are other questions. They're not like stupid question, okay? This is this is the starting point. Any question is interesting and important, and we're big also on question that's for another webinar. But could you expand a little bit, if possible, in the way cognitive diversity and creative intelligence kind of work together, if at all?
Of course. So as I said, cognitive diversity is something as a brand we believe in as an incredibly powerful, for lack of a better word, tool. I don't particularly like the word tool there, but I can't currently think of a better one. As I said, it is the bringing together of different perspectives into one conversation, into one piece of feedback. And it's over the years of projects that we have noticed the ones with the most success, the ones with the best outputs. And I believe Adam has been doing some scientific research behind this as well to give us some more proof points. But those are the projects that have the most successful outputs, the ones with the most creative cognitive diversity within them. To join that up with creative intelligence, the other piece we've noticed is that the participants and the people involved in those projects, the ones that give the best responses and the teams that give the best feedback, are the ones that have creative intelligence, which is what led us down this line of really starting to think about it, because we were asking ourselves, why is it these people are so great at responding to our challenges? And it's because they're the people that are the most reflective. It's the people that can pull on their past experiences and share their insights through creativity, that harness their imagination to think of the future. So on one level, creative intelligence the creative intelligence of a team can boost the cognitive diversity of that team and produce better outputs, if that answers your question. But on the other flip side, it is a piece of creative intelligence, being able to harness that feedback and being able to see the value of that feedback is one of the principles of creative intelligence, as we said.
Yeah, I totally agree, because when you were talking about biases and how sometimes we only see things through our own personal perception, what came to my mind is that every time I found myself in diverse teams, I was more aware of my biases, because I was like, oh, so this is not like the norm for everyone. It's just the norm for me, because, you know, I have my own view of the world, which is molded by my experiences, my upbringing, my education, the place I was born in. And so it's only when you're confronted with the fact that people come from, you know, different upbringing, different experience, that you really understand how important it is to have this diversity around you, because otherwise you simply won't see different perspective, because they're not something that you're familiar with.
Precisely, yes.
Awesome. So we hope that it was enough for you to start thinking and incorporating creative intelligence. And as we said, there are so many different ways you can still cultivate your creative intelligence. We try to share content with you in the platform that, in a sense, will expand your mind and your horizons, and then again contribute to, you know, this creativity growth, but also the courses and all the material that we share. And we are going to again post this webinar on Friday along with the 5 principles that we just shared. And of course, the conversation continues in the comments, so feel free to chime in, share it if it was interesting with your friends. Everyone is welcome, because again, cognitive diversity is whenever you have a lot of interesting people in the room. So ask your interesting friend to come and join us in the network. And thank you so much, Freddie. It was incredibly well delivered. So I really appreciate your way to explain things in a way that anyone, even me, can understand.
My pleasure, Joya, and thank you to everybody for joining. And yeah, if you do have any more questions, feel free to shoot them over in an email or on the Sense Network.
I really enjoyed that.
Great, it's good to hear. Thank you, Paul.
Have fun and be creative. Spread the creativity all around.
Brilliant.
Ciao, everyone. See you next week with another episode. Bye.
Bye.